Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I get to interview Lindsey Lockett. I feel like I could be really good friends with Lindsey if we were anywhere near close to each other. But we had a really amazing conversation. We have a lot in common. She is a trauma educator, a nervous system coach, and the host of her own podcast called the Holistic Trauma Healing Podcast. She left behind the dogmas of fundamentalism religion and toxic wellness culture. She experienced her own dark night of the soul, and during this healing journey that followed, she realized that trauma affects us as whole people, and therefore we need to heal as whole people. Although Lindsey had benefited tremendously from therapy, psychiatry, these modalities never totally resonated with her because she found that they forced her to fragment herself rather than heal holistically. She set out to find an affordable and accessible approach that integrates the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and ancestral parts of our being. And then she woke up and started taking care of her nervous system. She now teaches about the nervous system and nervous system regulation, awareness, and healing trauma through online workshops, group coaching, and one-on-one coaching. Lindsey enjoys foraging and making plant medicines, cold plunging in Lake Superior, and hosting community gatherings. She and her husband of 20 years live with their daughter and their 2 dogs on a 6-acre homestead in the wilderness of northeastern Minnesota. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation, and I have a feeling there will be a part 2 with Lindsey. So let's join the revolution. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am really excited today to talk to my new friend, Lindsey Lockett. Hi, Lindsey. How are you?
Hey, Amanda. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited. So I was just sharing with Lindsey before the podcast that I actually found her old Instagram and food blog because she was the only person that used the hashtag cervicitis. And I was searching for it because when I was getting sick from mold, I developed cervicitis and then found her lovely holistic crunchy account with all sorts of tips on what to do for that. So that's kind of how I found Lindsey.
Did you do the things I suggested?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They were way better than what was suggested on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So of course, interesting enough, around the same time, I was getting really deep into like nervous system work and trauma work and discovering the limbic system. I also noticed that so were you, and you were doing a lot of the exact same things that I was doing. So finally, I'm excited to hear your whole story and let everyone get to know you as well.
Oh, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So yeah, you can start from whenever you want and be as detailed as you want and just let everyone know kind of how you got to this space and are in this like trauma healing, holistic coaching situation now.
Okay, for sure. So I will try to give the most brief but somewhat detailed version of my story. I could probably spend an entire episode just sharing my story, which I don't think people might like to hear that, but I think that there's other more interesting things to talk about. So essentially, I grew up with a lot of trauma. I was physically, verbally, mentally, and emotionally abused by my stepfather growing up. He was abusive, narcissistic. Basically, our whole house revolved around keeping him happy. I also grew up in evangelical Christianity in the South, in the Bible Belt. And so I had a lot of wounding around my sexuality, my body, like myself as a woman, because women are basically like second-class citizens in evangelical Christianity, at least in the South, and fundamentalist Christianity, how I was raised. So I had a lot of religious trauma to heal from. And then I think I've had anxiety my whole life. I can remember as a child, going to the nurse's office pretty frequently with a stomach ache. And I can look back now and I can see that that was my body talking to me, but I didn't know how to listen to my body. And so the story that I had about that was just that I had stomach problems or digestive problems. And so I did not know how to listen to my body at all. I was very disconnected from my body because I had to dissociate to get through physical abuse, because religion taught me that my body was evil and that it was supposed to be covered up. And then just other programming that I received and layers of protection that I had to put on and adapt in order to survive, to get through life. And so everything kind of came to a head in 2018. That's the year that I went through my dark night of the soul, was late 2018, early 2019. Pretty much everything that could go wrong in my life did go wrong in my life, from my marriage feeling like it was falling apart, to feeling like a failure as a mom of two young teenagers, to things in our house breaking that were super expensive. At one point, all three of our cars were broken, so we couldn't even go anywhere. Like, it was just a lot of shit happening. It ended up being my wake-up call. It ended up being like the catalyst for a lot of personal growth, change, and healing. And I actually attempted suicide on March 7th, 2019. And obviously I was unsuccessful. A couple of days later, I checked myself into inpatient mental health care. I knew that I wasn't leaving the hospital without psychiatric medications. And 5 days later, I checked myself out on a cocktail of psych meds. Very grateful to have the meds. I don't have any kind of stigma against medication. I recognize that there are side effects, but I also recognize that there are therapeutic benefits, and I experienced those. And I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, after I was on this cocktail of psych meds, as you know, from having a history as a food blogger following me, like, I am a very natural, crunchy, hippie kind of person. And so going down the route of hospitalization and psych meds was like a whole new world for me. And it was a world that I had tried my best to avoid because I was scared of it and I had a lot of judgments against it. And then I found myself needing it. And so that was a cosmic spanking. And yeah, while I was on those psych meds, I promised myself that I was going to get to the root of whatever it was that caused me to get in such a mess to begin with, and that I was going to heal it. And being a food blogger and very steeped in health and wellness culture, I was on what I call the hamster wheel of wellness for a very long time. And so I was experiencing mystery chronic symptoms and using all kinds of restrictive healing diets and fasting and keto and paleo and bone broth fasts and expensive supplement protocols and all the things that we're told we need to do and figure out in order to be well by the wellness industry. I was doing all of those things and I wasn't going anywhere. I was just going in circles. And that's why I call it the hamster wheel of wellness. Always looking for the next right supplement, the next right diet, the next practitioner, basically always looking outside of myself, because I did not believe that what I had on my own was enough, and that my wellness was going to be found inside of myself and not outside of myself. And after checking myself out of the hospital and getting on all those psychiatric medications, that's when I realized that if restrictive healing diets and supplements had been what I had needed to be well, I would have been well, because I was literally a professional wellness healer expert. And so I was able to see, like, this isn't working. I've been on this hamster wheel for a really long time and it's clearly not working. So I'm not going to stay on this hamster wheel anymore. I'm going to try something else. And I came across information about the nervous system, about brain healing and brain inflammation, the role of trauma in all of that. And I also had a spiritual awakening, and I've had multiple different spiritual awakenings at this point. But essentially what I realized was that Our awareness and our consciousness is an integral part of the process. And it's not just about doing exercises or practices to heal your nervous system. It's not just about somatically processing trauma through the body. It's not just about healing the brain. All of those things are important. But what is equally important is the role of awareness and mindfulness in all of that. And so in 2020, I quit food blogging. I actually sold my food blog in 2021. And in late 2020, I started the Instagram account that I have now, just as kind of a way to, I've always been a transparent, open book kind of person. And so it's just a way for me to be like really transparent about what I was going through and how I was healing, and to share that with the world. And without advertising or marketing or anything, I started having people come to me asking me for coaching, asking me to teach them, to work with them. And I opened myself up to do that and decided that I could try. And the worst thing that would happen was that I wouldn't be good at it or I wouldn't like it. And that did not happen. I ended up being extremely good at it and I love it. And so now I work full-time as a trauma coach, nervous system coach, podcast host, trauma educator, and a coach, which I think I said. So that's essentially the shortest version of my story I can tell. And I did that in like 10 minutes. So that's pretty great.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Some of the really important parts that I think you pointed out were the use of like medications, psychiatric medications, or even any other type of Western meds, and not having a stigma around that, even if you are somebody who believes in doing root cause work. Because I kind of went through that as well. When I hit like my rock bottom physical health, I was like, all right, I have to take antihistamines. I'm going to have to take even something to sleep because I'm not sleeping. And just kind of letting go of that attachment to, I'm going to do everything perfectly. And It's not going to, I'm not going to need any of your Western medicine garbage.
Yeah. I still take a prescription antihistamine every day. It's one of those things that a couple years ago, that version, or more than a couple years ago, 4 years ago, that version of me would have been like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will just do a low histamine diet and I will take low histamine probiotics, and I will do bone broth in my Instant Pot because bone broth on the stove is really high in histamine, and I'll never eat leftovers, and I'll do all these things. And then I was just like, all of that feels more stressful to me than taking an antihistamine. I'm just going to take the fucking antihistamine and everything is going to be okay. I take an antihistamine every day and I don't have mold in my house. We've checked, but I am pretty allergic to a lot of the trees and pollens that are in my environment here in Minnesota. And I haven't always lived in Minnesota, so I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Texas in the South, and it's a whole different ecosystem up here. And my body loves it, except for the part that makes me have an itchy throat and sneeze. And also, I mean, histamine affects sleep as well. And so I just take the daily antihistamine. It's a prescription. It's safe. It's like an old drug. It's been around forever. I don't have any side effects from it. It's fine. And I'm not a failure.
Yeah. I like how you wrap that up. Because I think with that hamster wheel of wellness, we get really tied into doing things perfectly. The rigidity in that culture is just so stressful. And, you know, I can hear it the first time I'll meet with a client in their voice, like, and can I take 3 drops? And what time of day? Does it matter what I eat when I take the 3 drops? When can I start taking 4? And you're just like, okay, it's not,
bring it down.
There's no right way to do this. I promise.
Yeah. And to me, whenever like I hear that from clients too, most of the people who work with me are not strangers to wellness culture. And they've been there, they've done that, they've spent the money, they have all the t-shirts, like they're experts at it too. And so they come to me because they also realize that paradigm is limited and it's very rigid, and it promises wellness, but it requires a state of nervous system activation to maintain a lifestyle like that. And so like long-term nervous system dysregulation in the name of wellness is like the biggest contradiction of terms ever. It will not work.
Yeah. And for me, I was a little opposite of you. So I was really great at shutting off everything going on in my body and using drugs and alcohol and having fun and just completely ignoring all the signs until, of course, you crash. And then when I used to like want to get well and start to realize like the toll I was taking on myself, I would think to myself, like, if I could just do this perfectly, if I could just stop drinking and do this diet perfectly, then I'll be fine. And then what happened was I did it perfectly finally one day and nothing got better. And I was like, there must be something else to this, because the whole time I thought you just had to do it perfectly, and totally opposite of that.
Totally opposite.
Yeah. So let's get into like the basics of the nervous system. So what exactly are you talking about or referring to when you say like nervous system work?
Okay, so I'm talking about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is, it's not our central nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is where our fight flight response lives. In polyvagal theory, there's a ladder. And this is how Stephen Porges, who is the author of the polyvagal theory, this is how he describes the movement that our nervous systems go through all day, every day. And this is supposed to happen. So at the top of the ladder, we have what's called the social engagement state. And in that state, we feel calm, we can connect with others, we can collaborate, we can be creative, we can solve problems, we can enjoy art and music, we can enjoy nature, we can feel peace, we can experience safe touch and intimacy, build community, things like that. And then as we begin to go down the ladder, that's when nervous system activation starts. So we would go down from safe and social into the mobilization of our nervous system. So that would be fight and then flight. And in fight flight, obviously, that's like when you are hiking and you come across a bear in the woods without you having to think about it or make a plan or Google what to do, your body springs into action and you immediately, your heart will speed up, your muscles will tense, your digestion shuts down, your elimination shuts down, your reproductive drive shuts down, your pupils dilate, and it's like all of the resources in your body are now being redirected to your survival. And so all of the energy that you would spend thinking and digesting food and having sex and all of that is now redirected into your survival. And so that's the fight flight state. So you're either going to fight the bear or you're going to run away from the bear. And we need a lot of resources to do that. And then as we move further down the polyvagal ladder, we get into immobilization. And this is what people commonly call the freeze response. But freeze is not very accurate because humans are never really in a full state of freeze. So certain animals like snakes, for example, and even mammals do this, like they get in a really stressful situation and fight or flight isn't going to work for them. And so they go into a freeze state where they're literally playing dead. So if anybody's ever seen like an animal like turn over on its back and like freeze, it's playing dead because its nervous system, without any conscious thought on the part of the organism, the nervous system determined that running away from the threat wasn't going to save the animal and fighting the threat wasn't going to save the animal. So the only thing left to do is to freeze and play dead. And so that's the immobilization of our nervous system. And in humans, immobilization or freeze occurs on a spectrum. And so it's anything from like a low grade freeze is stuff like boredom, apathy, numbness. Then we start moving into like depression. And then we move into states like I can't. We feel helpless, hopeless. And then we just get into like shutting down. Can't move, can't think, can't speak, can't take action. And so that's the spectrum of the freeze response. So everything I just described from safe and social, fight, flight, and immobilization are all ways that our nervous system is moving up and down that ladder, vacillating between various states. We're very often in mixed states. And so like, if you think about what a panic attack feels like, it's like you have all of this fight flight energy going in your body, but you also feel like you can't move or think or speak and you don't know what to do. And so that causes this like, right? Like hyperventilation, whatever. So that's like, you've got one foot on the gas, which is fight flight. And then you have one foot on the brakes, which is freeze. So you've got like the gas and the brakes going at the same time. So you're spinning your wheels, but you're not going anywhere. So we're often in mixed states. People could associate that with like negative, if I'm talking about panic. So like a positive, using air quotes there, mixed state of the nervous system is, for example, when we have like one foot at the top of the ladder in safe and social, and then we have another foot in the fight flight state. That's actually the state that we need to be in for play. That's the state that children are in whenever they're playing, because they need the mobilizations of their nervous system to have the energy and movement for play. But because they're connected, they're calm, they're at peace, they're experiencing joy, connection with others, they're also, they have access to that safe and social state. So nervous system states are not bad. They're not good. Fight flight is not bad. And a lot of people think that it is, but it's not, because if you think about it, like your fight response serves a purpose. Your flight response serves a purpose. For instance, we need a healthy fight response to be able to set boundaries, to be able to assert ourselves, to have the motivation to start a project and finish it. Like that requires mobilization of our nervous systems. And so these states are not bad. They're not good. They're just how our bodies are physiologically working instinctively, unconsciously, all the time, without us really having to do anything. The difference between humans and other mammals is that we have consciousness. And so other animals, mammals, like don't have the ability to consciously shut off their fight response or their flight response, or to mobilize themselves out of a freeze response. But as humans, we have consciousness, and that allows us to actually be able to use our consciousness to override certain nervous system responses. And the nervous system responses that are the most important to override are the ones that we are doing unconsciously, and they're more like a reaction. And typically those reactions are what hurts other people. So what I mean by this is, like, as a parent, for example, if your child is doing something really annoying and it's getting on your nerves, you start feeling irritable in your body, right? You start feeling that irritation, that frustration. Maybe you're feeling overstimulated from the noise or the mess they're making or whatever. And irritation, overstimulation, frustration, those are all the mobilization of your fight response. Like your body is beginning to perceive that as like, this is too much. I don't like this. I want to fight back. And so you yell at your kid. That's an unconscious response. Nobody is ever like, you know what? I'm going to consciously yell at my kids. That's going to be what helps this situation, is if I yell at them. So it's an unconscious response to what we're feeling in our bodies in the mobilization of our nervous system. Now, where consciousness comes in is that same parent, if they are in tune with their own bodies, they can feel that fight energy, that activation, that irritation, the frustration, the overstimulation. They can feel that and become conscious of what they're feeling. And instead of reacting by yelling at the child, they can override that response and consciously respond to the child. And so this is how we either perpetuating trauma or we're healing it, is by becoming aware of what's going on in our bodies and then using our awareness and consciousness to shift and make a different choice, change the pattern. And over time, this rewires the brain, because our brains are beautifully neuroplastic, which means that we have the ability to rewire our brains in response to stress and stimuli. And so if the unconscious behavior is yelling at the kids every time you feel irritation, frustration, and anger at the kids, then that pathway of your brain is carved out like the Grand Canyon. Kind of like when we brush our teeth. I bet you brush your teeth the same way every time you brush your teeth, right? You don't have to relearn how to brush your teeth every time you brush your teeth. Why? Because you've done it so many times that the pathway in your brain is so carved out that you can do it without thinking. So this is how our habits form, is it's literally like neural pathways forming in our brains. Whenever we're doing something unconsciously that has formed the neural pathway, for example, to yell at your kids, when you're trying to heal from that, you have to be compassionate with yourself and recognize that your brain is wired to do that, because it's done it so many times. It's unconscious. But once you make the conscious and then you choose something else, then you've now redirected that pathway and you're starting to create a new pathway. And over time, the old pathway kind of gets like, if you think about what a road looks like whenever it hasn't been maintained for a while, like weeds start growing up, you get a lot of potholes, the pavement starts coming up, and then eventually the road is like overgrown and it's impassable. And then you've formed a new pathway. So you've like made a new road. So neuroplasticity is a huge, huge part of it. Consciousness is a huge part of it. And it all starts with being able to feel what we're experiencing in our bodies. And so something that's really, really important to me is not just helping people heal this kind of stuff, but it's about educating people so that they have language to describe what's going on, because that education and that language is a key part in changing the patterns and healing the stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was well said. Beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really a struggle for me was connecting with my actual body. So getting out of the head and the thoughts and feeling what was actually going on, and saw countless people and, they were like, what do you feel? And I was like,
I don't know.
There's nothing there. I don't know. Exactly.
Yeah. So I help people reconnect to their bodies and to their feelings in a way that we don't pathologize. So what I mean by that is, for example, people who have a lot of what they think are digestive issues. So IBS, SIBO, food intolerances, bloating, whatever it is, stomach aches. What they perceive as a diagnosis or the problem was a sensation before it was a symptom or a diagnosis. But if they were living in their head all the time and not tuned into the sensation of the body and where maybe they were feeling anxiety in their belly or fear or something like that, if they're not tuned in and able to be with that sensation, which is also being with that emotion, then what we do is we default to the head. We have that sensation there. And then the story we tell ourselves about the sensation is, oh, there must be something wrong with my digestion. I have a digestive problem. I need to heal my gut. I need to take probiotics. I need to restrict my diet. I need to do all these things. When in actuality, if we could stop and be with the sensation and not pathologize it as there's something wrong with my gut, but it's just, oh, isn't it interesting that I'm experiencing this weird, hot, nauseous feeling in my belly right now? I wonder what this could be in response to. Oh, well, earlier today, I had a really weird meeting with my boss, and now I'm like afraid that my job is on the line or something. Like that's a threat to your survival. Your body is obviously responding to it. And we're so disconnected from our bodies that our bodies are whispering to us for a long, long time. And if we don't listen to those whispers, then our bodies have to scream. And our bodies are screaming. Like by the time we've got the diagnosis of IBS or of autoimmune or whatever it is, whatever the mental illness, whatever the diagnosis is, by the time we've gotten to that point, we have been experiencing that sensation in our bodies for a very, very long time. We just maybe weren't aware of it. And so I help people get back in their bodies, out of their heads, feel what they're feeling in their body without trying to diagnose it, without pathologizing it, without creating stories about it. And if the stories are there, we just let them be there. And we kind of try to bring neutrality into the story and be like, oh, isn't that so interesting that this is the story I'm telling myself about this? Isn't that so interesting? That's so curious. And so we try to have this attitude of like childlike curiosity instead of everything being like so serious and so pathological all the time. And that's a challenge that takes a while because, as you said, you were used to being in your head all the time. So somebody being like, well, what do you feel? You're like, I don't know what the fuck I feel. I'm trying not to feel because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I love that you pointed out having that curiosity instead of the fear of the symptom or the resistance of the symptom, because that is what sends you further into that fight or flight and further into freeze. And then that symptom just gets locked back up. That emotion just gets locked back up. So learning how to process and flow through those emotions or situations or symptoms is just so important.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, are you familiar with German New Medicine at all?
No.
So they explain the nervous system in like it makes perfect sense with what I know about the nervous system, but all of the symptoms happen in the healing phase. So the conflict active stage is like sympathetic. And then once you go into parasympathetic is where you get all the symptoms and the body like repairs itself. So you might get like cell growth or cell proliferation and sloughing off wherever like the symptom is. So if it's skin, you'll get rashes. It's the digestive system. You may get like either growths or tumors, or maybe you'll get diarrhea because the cells are sloughing off. And they explain it in a way that it fits, like I said, like with what I know about the nervous system. but it helps to shift when you have a symptom and out of the fear that something's going wrong and knowing that, oh, it's the healing phase. Like I've resolved some sort of conflict. So now I have this symptom that will pass as long as I don't resist it. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be finished with, my emotional conflict that I just went through.
Yeah. I've never heard of German New Medicine before, but that describes like literally what my process is now, because I don't live a symptom-free life. I don't think anyone lives a symptom-free life. And to be honest, I don't think the goal is symptom-free life.
Right.
And I think that especially like in toxic wellness culture, like that's the goal. And so all symptoms are pathologized. Like I remember watching some food blogger or health blogger or somebody talking about like white spots on your fingernails and like this whole spiel about like what white spots on your fingernails mean. And you better address it and you better correct these nutrient deficiencies or something really, really bad is going to happen. And so for a while I was like obsessed with white spots on my fingernails. And I'm like looking at my hands right now and I don't have any white spots on my fingernails. But at that time I did. But anyway, like, yeah, I don't think that the point is a symptom-free life. We're in human bodies. Our bodies are dying every day. Yeah. They're going to break down on us because of age and wear and tear. And because beyond any of our control, we live in a world full of toxins. And so we can do our best to like support our bodies with, cleaning up our homes and like getting rid of toxic things from our environment, eating better food, like stuff like that. But the perfectionism that's involved in it, as you said earlier, is like what really drives people honestly crazy. Right. And so I don't think the point is to get rid of symptoms. And I have completely changed my relationship with symptoms ever since I started this work. And now instead of viewing a symptom as this like horrible, pathological harbinger of something terrible going wrong in my body, I can feel the symptom or experience the symptom and just be with it. And I can notice when I have fear stories happening, like, oh, what does this mean? I wonder if it means this. I wonder if it means that. I can notice that, but I just don't respond to that anymore. Like in the past, if I would feel a weird sensation, let's say for like 3 days in a row, I would immediately go to Google and start like trying to diagnose myself, right? I call
research the hashtags.
Oh, I didn't research hashtags. I just like went straight to Google and just started like, trying to diagnose myself. And of course, according to like WebMD, everything is cancer. Yeah. And so or I would also go back when I was on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but back when I was on Facebook, I would go to I would join like all these Facebook support groups looking for answers because all these people I thought would have the answers, and it made me sicker. It was like, it was so insane. It just made me sicker. And so now I don't live a symptom-free life. I have some symptoms that I still haven't gotten to the root of. As I mentioned, allergies, right? Like I take a daily antihistamine. I've been clearing my throat the whole time we're talking because I'm having breakthrough allergy symptoms, even though I take an antihistamine every single day. If I was still on the hamster wheel of wellness, I would drop everything I was doing and I would start throwing everything I had at that. I would take like high doses of quercetin. I would start drinking nettle infusions. I would start taking like spore-based probiotics. I would start, eliminating dairy and eggs and sugar and all that from my diet. Like I would start throwing everything in my arsenal at it because I was afraid of it. But now I'm not afraid of it anymore. And because I'm not afraid of it, I can let go of the drive to like figure it out and fix it because I don't see it as a problem anymore. I see the symptoms now are a way that my body is communicating to me. And yeah, they might be inconvenient, might be uncomfortable, it might be painful, but I'm not against the symptoms because if I am, then I'm against my body and I can't feel safe in a body that I'm fighting against. So my relationship with symptoms is totally different. And now whenever I do feel like a resurgence of symptoms, I don't feel anxiety over allergies. I feel anxiety if I experience like a pelvic symptom. So like, for instance, if my period is like super heavy 1 month or something, which hasn't happened in a long time, but I'll just use that as an example. So like a lot of cramping and maybe heavy bleeding, clotting, stuff like that, things that people would be like, oh, you better go get checked out. That's not normal. I keep that in mind, but I can just be with it and notice what's happening, feel it in my body. And what you said about resistance is the key. Like if I'm resisting it, if I'm doom Googling and trying to find the answer and diagnose myself, I'm resisting it. Whatever I'm resisting, I'm afraid of. If I turn the computer off, put the phone down, go lay on the couch and feel whatever the pain is that's there, often within 24 hours, it's totally gone because I surrendered to it. And I was just present with it in the moment and accepting of this is what's happening right now. And no amount of control that I might want to have over this is really going to change anything. My body is going to do what it's going to do, no matter how much Googling I do, no matter how many Facebook support groups I'm in. So I just surrender to it. And I don't really do a lot of mantras and I don't really believe in like affirmations and stuff, but in a regulated state, when I'm regulated in my body and I'm still experiencing a symptom, I go to the affirmation or the mantra that I choose to feel without fear. And I just remind myself, I choose feeling, not fear. I choose feeling, not fear. And if I'm regulated, then that works. And often the symptom or the sensation or whatever will resolve in 24 to 48 hours. And even if it doesn't resolve though, I work with a lot of people with health anxiety too. And even if the symptom doesn't resolve, like let's say it just keeps going, if I'm present and aware and being with that feeling or that sensation or that symptom, then I've got my finger on the pulse of it and I'm really sensitive to its shifts. So you can feel really quickly, like if it's better, if it's worse, if it's intensified, if it's decreased, whatever. And doing this doesn't mean that you're never going to need to go to the doctor ever again. It doesn't mean that you might not need medical help, right? It doesn't even mean that there's nothing serious wrong. But what if you could go seek the help that you needed from a grounded place rather than a panicked place? And that's what this work allows us to be able to do is it's no guarantee that nothing's ever going to go wrong. But it means that if you do need help, you can seek it from a grounded place instead of being panicked and freaked out. When I was going through my stuff in 2018 and 2019, I went to the emergency room 4 separate times for things that were not emergency. But I was so terrified of what I was experiencing. And the story I told myself was that there was something horribly wrong with me. And my way of maintaining control over that was, well, if I can't get in to see the doctor for 3 weeks, I'll just go to the emergency room. They have to see me there, And so it was a way of maintaining control because I wasn't able to surrender and I was constantly resisting what I was feeling and fighting against it and trying to fix it. Mm-hmm. And none of the things that I ever went to the emergency for were emergencies, but I just wanted control. I just wanted to do something about it right that minute because the thought of sitting with it for another week or 2 weeks or however long was unacceptable to me. And thankfully I'm out of that place now. Now I can experience a weird thing happening in my body and I don't feel the need to get in the car and drive to the emergency room because I know that if I sit with it and wait it out, 9 times out of 10, it resolves on its own.
Yeah. And I think that control and wanting to have the exact answers in the diagnosis, that's also validating that there was something wrong with you, or you maybe have some secondary gains going on of, well, if this is wrong with me, then I don't have to do this. Or if this is wrong with me, I have an excuse not to show up and do this the next day, or even something you want to do. Then I don't have the energy to start my own business, those self-sabotaging type thoughts. Have you had to give up coffee for health reasons? Maybe because of the stress it was putting on your adrenals, maybe because it was messing with your sleep, maybe because you felt terrible after drinking it, or maybe because you were told coffee had mold on the beans and you needed to stay away from mold. Well, what if I told you there's an organic, mycotoxin-free, quality coffee that contains reishi spores or Ganoderma lucidum? Ganoderma lucidum helps to modulate your immune system, adapt to stress, balance hormones, and doesn't give you the jitters or shakes like regular coffee used to. Sounds too good to be true, right? It's called King Coffee by the company Organo. And King Coffee came into my life when I was struggling with chronic hives, full body eczema, and mast cell activation syndrome. I hadn't drank coffee in years because it made me feel anxious, shaky, and clammy. So I had no expectations that drinking King Coffee would be any different. However, I decided to give it a try after seeing lots of amazing practitioners talk about the benefits of reishi online. I tried a 7-day sample and the chronic hives were gone by day 5. I was in shock. After that, I dove into the research on reishi and found that there are over 3,000 peer-reviewed PubMed clinical trials using reishi Ganoderma as an intervention. The company Organo also has a patent protected on their harvesting process. They double crack open the spore shells, which makes them up to 80% more potent than the body of the reishi, which is usually used in other reishi products. This also makes the spores 90% more bioavailable for your body to use. If you would like to try King Coffee, visit thehealerrevolution.myorganogold.com, or for a 7-day trial, you can check out my link tree on my Instagram at Amanda Panacea.
I definitely did all of those things. My husband would be like, babe, let's go for a hike. Oh, I can't. My anxiety is too bad today.
Yeah.
When really that was exactly what I needed was to like go be in nature, or, honestly, like I can admit this now, if somebody in my community wanted me to volunteer for something, it was my go-to to like use my anxiety as a way to not do what they wanted me to do. And like, I'm not ashamed to admit that. It's the truth. I can be honest about it. But we do have those secondary gains of like, this thing in my life is shitty, but I'm going to milk the benefits of it as well. And I was doing it unconsciously, and once we make that kind of unconscious behavior conscious, I don't think anybody is like, yeah, I want to use my health issue to get out of doing shit. Like nobody does that consciously,
Definitely not. No. I mean, maybe every once in a while. Like for me, it was a great excuse to finally quit drinking. Like, oh, I have health issues now. So I can no longer go out, because I had a really hard time setting those boundaries without that excuse. And
I think that's totally valid. And I think too, maybe that wasn't what you needed, but other people who don't understand, that is an explanation that they can understand. That's a great perspective.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to point out when you were referring to like getting into Facebook groups and doom Googling, I honestly at this point look back and think I might have sent myself into topical steroid withdrawal, because I only took prednisone for 12 days, and 12 days of prednisone is not something that's going to send you into horrific topical steroid withdrawal. But because I knew about it, and I was so afraid of it happening, and I was so mad that I had to take the prednisone to begin with, because I was like, you guys are going to see, I'm going to take this and something bad's going to happen. And then it did.
Yeah. That's a really good point as well. That's why I had to get out of the Facebook groups.
They're horrible.
They're so horrible. So one of the things that I actually was diagnosed with whenever I was going through all of this mess in 2018 and 2019, I was experiencing debilitating anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia. I went 5 months without sleeping. Like I was experiencing those kinds of things, but at the same time, I was also having some really weird pelvic issues happening. And in the middle of that is when I got cervicitis and was given antibiotics for the cervicitis on a visit to the ER. That was one of my ER visits that I didn't need to go to the ER for. But I was given antibiotics, and like a week later, I still have this cervicitis issue. And I don't know if any women listening have ever experienced cervicitis, but when your cervix is like angry and swollen and like it feels like it's about to fall out of your vagina, it's extremely concerning.
Yes.
And so after a week of these antibiotics and I still wasn't getting any better, that's when I started the colloidal silver douching and like vaginal probiotics and all of that. And I did end up, healing myself from that. But another thing that I had going on in addition to the cervicitis was I also had pelvic floor dysfunction, and I also had a vein condition called pelvic congestion syndrome. And so I needed pelvic floor physical therapy. Like I wasn't making that up. That wasn't psychosomatic. I didn't even know pelvic floor dysfunction was a thing. I wasn't in any Facebook groups about it. So like, it's not something that I psychosomatically, like subconsciously made its way into my thought process and then I manifested it. And pelvic congestion was the same way. I literally had never, ever heard of it before. And what pelvic congestion is, for people wondering, is it's basically varicose veins in the pelvis. And so it's like around the uterus, bladder, ovaries, they get distended just like varicose veins in the legs do. It's just, you can't see them from the outside of the body because they're on the inside. That's not something I could psychosomatically create either. But I also have had the psychosomatic experiences of like being in a Facebook group, reading about something, and then like the next day I'm having that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, like getting out of the Facebook groups helped. I don't really feel like Facebook groups are helpful at all, or like Reddit threads or message boards or like anything about health things. But I recognize why people use them. It's because our doctors don't educate us. And often our doctors are not educated about things themselves. Like I had to go to London to get my pelvic veins treated. Like I couldn't find anyone in the US who was really knowledgeable about it and could do it. And so I ended up going to London. And for that reason, I am glad that I found the Facebook groups, and I am glad that I knew how to research and learn for myself. But on the whole, I feel like they're more trouble than they are helpful. And more dysregulating. They activate our fight flight response and make us feel like, oh my God, I have to do something. Right.
And everybody's opinions is totally different. So you read a thread of like 50 people, they all said something different. Yeah. So not helpful at all.
Yeah. That's why looking outside of ourselves for answers is not a good idea.
Yeah. So you mentioned stop doom Googling. What are some other like tips that you have for people that just want to start to be more in tune with their nervous system and get out of that fight or flight?
Yeah. I mean, go outside, literally go outside, lay a blanket on your grass and lay in the sun. Like go outside, turn your phone notifications off. That's another one. I have an Instagram post. It's like 9 free ways you can support your nervous system. So I'm pulling from that, like what I remember from that post. So like turn your phone notifications off. Like every ding and vibrate of your phone it's activating your nervous system every single time. You can stop that pretty easily. Stop the doom Googling, the doom scrolling, like on social media. Stop that is a great free way to take care of your nervous system. Another, I've been talking about this week, free way to take care of your nervous system is like cleaning up your space. You know, like if we think about it, trauma is the energy of events that are stored in our bodies and our bodies remember. And so trauma energy is like physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, ancestral clutter. And so part of healing from that is like going in and cleaning it out, right? Like processing and feeling all the things that we didn't. But our nervous systems respond to both internal and external stimuli. And so not only are our nervous systems responding to the clutter of the trauma energy in our bodies, but our nervous systems are also responding to like the clutter of our external environments. And that's like more information that they have to process and metabolize. And if it's stressful, then it's messy for the nervous system. So clean up your space. Like it doesn't cost anything to make your bed or fold your laundry, things like that. What else? Outside.
You're missing your favorite one, the cold.
Oh, my cold plunges. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, cold plunges are an excellent exercise for the nervous system. They can really help to strengthen the nervous system and create more resiliency to stress. And if you have access to I have access to Lake Superior, which is always cold, but I have a client who does not have access to a cold body of water, and she fills up her bathtub and dumps a bag of ice in it. And that's how she does her cold plunges. So cold plunges are excellent. I have a free training for those actually on my website. People can get that at lindseylockett.com/cold plunge. Yeah, there's so many great ways to take care of your nervous system, but more than just like, oh, here's these 9 free things I can do to take care of my nervous system. Yes, nervous system care is important, but what I don't have content around is like, here's 9 free ways to start practicing awareness. Like awareness is a little bit less tangible, I think. Yeah. But it's still something that I teach a lot about because I cannot exclude awareness from my work at all. Like I just cannot. And then again, you can be taking all the good care of your nervous system in the world, but what a lot of people don't know is that trauma actually causes brain injury and brain inflammation. And when we experience trauma, which is anything that our nervous systems perceive is too much, too fast, too soon. Resmaa Menakem is the one who coined that phrase, too much, too fast, too soon. Anything that our nervous system perceive as too much, too fast, too soon is stored in the body and it goes unprocessed and unmetabolized, and therefore it's not integrated into our experience. And so it's like a loop that's on repeat that hasn't been closed quite yet. And physiologically, because of the stress of whatever this thing is, it causes inflammation in our brains. And so what that looks like is a release of inflammatory cytokines, which are inflammatory cells. It also primes microglia in our brain. And so it's called microglial activation or microglial priming. So microglia in their healthy state are these very soothing anti-inflammatory white blood cells that are responsible for like our neuronal pruning, which all of our brains undergo a pruning process that's necessary. And a lot of that happens when we're sleeping. And so when we're not sleeping, then we're not having that necessary pruning happen. But we get microglial activation. And when microglia become primed, they basically like switch from like Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. And so instead of being anti-inflammatory, they're very pro-inflammatory. And microglial priming or microglial activation is a very, very, very understood and accepted source of brain inflammation. And a lot of conditions can be traced back to microglial priming or microglial activation. And so we have to heal the brain. Like we literally have to heal the brain. And anything that is trauma energy in the body has the ability to create brain inflammation. So it's not just getting a concussion and getting knocked on the head. That certainly does cause brain injury, but there's also such thing as emotional traumatic brain injury. And so going through a really difficult divorce or the loss of a parent or child or spouse or physical abuse, sexual abuse, being raped, being in a car accident, even if you weren't physically injured in the car accident, you can be emotionally injured from a car accident. Pregnancy, birth, those things can be traumatic even when they go perfectly because they're very hard on a woman's body. So stuff like that can cause brain injury as well. And I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who will tell me that they were doing pretty fine in their lives and life was going along and like maybe their health wasn't perfect, but it was fine and they felt good most of the time and they slept good and all this kind of stuff. And then something happened, like a divorce or a death or something like that. And they just weren't the same afterwards. And they're like, it's like something switched in my body and I haven't been the same since. And when somebody tells me that, I immediately look at the brain and I'm like, you've got an unresolved brain injury that's like not healing itself. And so we have to look at like nourishing the brain and nutrients for the brain. So some things that people can do to nourish their brains are to stop eating foods with seed oils in them. So those are like omega-6 fatty acids, which are found in things like sunflower and safflower oil, canola oil, soybean oil, peanut oil, margarine, Crisco, like vegetable oils, stuff like that. Terrible for our brains. They're so inflammatory that those substances should be illegal, honestly.
Yeah.
Because they don't do anything good for our bodies. Like they cause us to be overweight and they cause us to have diabetes and heart disease. And they're just so inflammatory on every level, metabolically, brain-wise, just digestive wise, they're just so inflammatory. So eliminating seed oils as much as you possibly can from your diet is going to really support your brain. And then also supporting your brain with omega-3 fatty acids. So that's like fish oil, super good for our brains. And I'm talking high doses. I'm not talking like 500 milligrams a day. I'm talking like 3,000 milligrams a day of fish oil. And make sure that you source a really high quality fish oil. It doesn't have to be fermented. Just make sure it's been tested to be free from like metals and stuff like that. It's a great way to support your brain. And then there are a few supplements that I'm sort of hesitant to mention because my own relationship with supplements. Like I'm healing that relationship. And I had a supplement-free life for like 2 years. And I've just in the last few months added some supportive supplements back in, and they have been really, really supportive. And my energy around using them is totally different than what it used to be. I don't feel like I'm outsourcing my health. I don't feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. I don't feel like I'm trying to control something. It truly does feel like grounded and supportive use of supplements. But excellent supplements for the brain. I'll say 3. So 2 of them are amino acids like glycine and taurine. Excellent for neurotransmitter support, sleep support, really good for the brain. And then another one is something that I just started using in the last month. And I could tell a difference the first day I took this supplement, and it's called PEA, like P, but it's called PEA. And it's an abbreviation for a super long, difficult word to say. So I will butcher it, but I will try to say it. And it stands for palmitoyl ethanolamide.
That was good.
Yeah, thanks. So the research is really incredible for PEA in terms of neuro support, reducing brain inflammation. It's also being used to support people who deal with pain from like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, things like that. So I don't want to, but big disclaimer, you can't out supplement your brain. So
Yes.
I don't want people listening to this podcast and then just going, oh, I'll just go buy this glycine, this taurine, and this PEA, and I don't have to change anything else about my life because that will fix everything. Please don't do that. That's why I'm so hesitant to mention supplements. But yeah, just eating to support your brain, eating things like salmon, really good fat like coconut oil, butter, extra virgin olive oil that's high in polyphenols is incredible for the brain. I take 2 tablespoons of high polyphenol olive oil every single day. Yeah, those are some things that can be really supportive of the brain.
So interesting that you mentioned the brain and healing the brain, because actually in German New Medicine, the whole like concept behind the trauma of the psyche, it shows up in the brain. So they actually did brain scans. The doctor who discovered it, they did brain scans he first discovered it in a cancer ward because he had tragically lost his son. Then he developed testicular cancer. And when he was rounding in the hospital, he realized every single other person with testicular cancer also had suffered a great loss. So he started doing brain scans and found like the inflammation in certain parts of the brain. So right in line.
Yeah, it totally is protocol, but I have done it myself for 2.5 years now. It's called the Nemechek protocol. He has a book, a website, and a YouTube channel that are fantastic. And it's all about healing the brain to heal the autonomic nervous system. So it's a really simple protocol. It's like high doses of fish oil, high doses of olive oil that are high in polyphenols, vagus nerve stimulation. And then there is a rebalancing of the gut, but we don't use probiotics. We don't use fasting, bone broth, anything like that. It's just every once in a while you take a round of an antibiotic called rifaximin. And I've been doing this protocol since March of 2020. And I'm convinced that it exponentially expedited my healing process because at the same time I was doing the bottom up work of like somatic processing, nervous system healing and regulation, nervous system hygiene, I was also coming at it from the top and doing the brain healing work as well. And I just think it made it go so much faster because I was doing it from both directions. And so if people want to look into that more, it's called the Nemechek protocol. And maybe you can put a link in the show notes or something.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Just send me the link and I'll add it for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he talks about cumulative brain injury. And so that was where I first learned that trauma of any kind, emotional or physical, can cause injury and inflammation in the brain. And I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it works. And it's really simple. And he's like, doesn't want people on his protocol to take any supplements at all because he's like, they're not regulated and you don't know what their potency is. And you don't know if what's in the bottle or what's on the bottle is actually what's in the bottle. And so he's pretty skeptical of supplements, but I trust myself and I trust my research and I trust my own body. And so I recently, like in the last 6 months, added in the glycine and the taurine just for some extra support, especially because I've had a couple of relapses of insomnia. And for me, anytime I have a relapse, so my big symptoms are anxiety and insomnia. So anytime I have a relapse of anxiety or insomnia, like I know that my brain is experiencing more inflammation and that the level of inflammation has risen to a point that now my body's talking to me about it. And so I added in the glycine and the taurine to help with that after a recent bout of insomnia several months ago. And then I had another relapse of insomnia after I had COVID in June. And it makes total sense. COVID is very inflammatory. And like one of the big things that people were worried about with COVID was something called the cytokine storm. And I just talked about cytokines earlier, and they're these really inflammatory cells that if we have a storm of them, it's like the body's like going crazy. And a lot of people with autoimmune issues were experiencing cytokine storms when their bodies were trying to fight off COVID. And so I didn't have a cytokine storm, but COVID triggered enough brain inflammation for me that I did have a relapse of insomnia. And it was a 2-month relapse. I actually just got out of it like within the last 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
But that was when I started the PEA. And so now I am supporting my neurological health with glycine, taurine, and PEA. And those are the only supplements. I mean, other than magnesium, I take magnesium too, but those are the only supplements that I use. I think everyone takes magnesium.
Yeah. I mean, there's very foundational, and I love food first, like food-based supplements. So like beef liver or like fulvic acids, anything that is natural occurring is great long-term. So yeah, there's no problem with supporting like your body's natural elimination pathways, because like you said, the world we live in, I feel like being on zero supplements and eating a decent diet is still kind of rare. Like I still think minerals, magnesium, maybe B vitamins in a food source are just really important for some people.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And like I do beef liver and like collagen and stuff like that, but I don't even call those supplements.
Right. Yeah.
those are foods, you know, like I could go buy some beef liver and dehydrate it and desiccate it myself in my blender, or I can just use the company that I use and I can order theirs and it's already done for me. So
exactly.
like things like that, things like, you know, I'm a big fan of like supporting liver detox pathways with algae like spirulina and chlorella. I don't consider those a supplement. I consider that to be a food, and I don't take it in a capsule form. If I use it, I have a powder and I scoop it and I put it in a drink or I put it in a smoothie or something like that. So the fewer pills I can take, the better. So I don't take liver in a pill. I don't take collagen in a pill. I don't take magnesium even in a pill. It's just a powder I scoop and I add it to a smoothie. But I do feel like those superfoods, especially the ones that are more like traditional nourishing foods, like liver, bone broth, things like that, I feel are really, really, really important for our overall health, literally for everyone.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's important. Like some people that are really stuck in that rigidity are like, they question, like, can I still do a sauna? Can I still do a castor oil pack? Like,
you can do whatever you want. It's your body. You don't need anyone's permission to do the things.
Exactly. And I think the intent behind it is, you know, shifting out of, I have to fix myself, something's wrong with me, and into like, I'm taking care of myself and I love myself. So just shifting your mindset, you can still do all the biohacks as long as the intent behind it is there.
Yeah. And honestly, the less, when I made that shift into like, I don't need to eat perfectly because I'm trying to fix something or heal something. I'm just going to eat well and I'm going to eat what I crave because like that's important. And if I need to add some collagen for extra protein or some magnesium and, you know, powder form or whatever, like that's fine. But the energy behind it is so much different that I'm not as interested in all the biohacks anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I've been there. I've done all of that. Like I bought the gadgets, I did the things, like it's just not interesting to me anymore. And I think it's because the attitude and the energy behind it isn't one of needing to fix or heal something. It's just one of like, I don't know if that's actually going to be super supportive of me. You know, even something that sounds really cool and fun, if it's going to take a lot of extra effort, I'm probably not going to do it because I would rather spend my time and effort like doing other things that I find enjoyable and not necessarily focusing on just myself, you know?
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head there. Focusing on fun and creative and things that you enjoy as opposed to, oh, it's time for my coffee enema.
I was literally just thinking about coffee enemas because I used to do them.
Yeah.
I did every day for 2 years.
Every day. Wow.
Every day for 2 years at 1 p.m. I did a coffee enema.
I was almost exact. That's funny.
Yep. Yeah. Like our coffee enema is great. Yes. Do I like, if I had cancer or something, would I do coffee enemas? 100%. I absolutely would. But you know, it takes like a solid hour to do a coffee enema. And that's just not how I want to spend an hour of my day every day anymore. You know, like I would rather like come on and like crawl around on my floor and do some nervous system hygiene or go lay on a blanket in the sun or go swimming, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just not interested in all the biohacking anymore.
Yeah, I get it. Awesome. Well, I kind of want to ask you now about like your business side of things. So you did all this work and you decided you were going to try coaching. What does your like business system look like? What does your day-to-day life look like? How do you manage working, but also staying aligned with taking care of yourself?
Yeah. So are you or your listeners familiar with human design at all?
Probably. I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in human design, I'm a 1-3 emotional projector. And I found that out probably a year ago, but even before I knew I was a projector, I've never been able to work like an 8-hour day. Like I cannot do it. I cannot have 87 irons in the fire and 10 projects going at once. And like, I cannot hustle. Like my body just will not allow me to do it. And I've got myself in trouble when I've tried to push and force my body to do it. And that's when she starts yelling at me with those sensations and symptoms, like, stop, slow down. And then I learned I was a projector, and I learned all the things about being a projector. And suddenly I was like, oh, this is why I don't work 8 hours a day ever. And this is why I can't hustle. It's not because I'm lazy. It's because like I am not made to do that in this lifetime. My business and I have a reciprocal relationship. So my business is, for me, it is an entity. It has its own consciousness, and I am in service of it. But we have a reciprocal relationship. And so I am also a being and a consciousness. And so my business has to serve me as well. And in this way, we have this really nourishing reciprocal relationship. And so I'm not always demanding my business to like, give me new ideas. How can I get more clients? How can I make more money? Like, tell me what to do. I'm not demanding that of my business. And my business also isn't like throwing so many ideas at me that I can't keep up and I can't keep it going. So we have this really great reciprocal relationship, my business and me. And so anything that I teach or do, from creating group programs to putting on a workshop or whatever, like I'm not always coming up with new stuff. I don't have a gazillion ideas happening all the time. But when something does come through from my business, it's like clear direction. And as long as I follow it and don't resist it, I will end up creating something that is amazing. But then I might not create anything else for a year. Because that's the kind of relationship I have with my business. It's not going to make me hustle and work all the time because that's not what I'm built to do. And so I don't really have like a set schedule other than I'm extremely protective of my time. If something doesn't light me up, I don't do it. So for example, I have only published 2 podcast episodes for my podcast for this whole summer. And that's because back in May, I was noticing that I was feeling a little bit resentful of my podcast. I was feeling annoyed by my podcast. I was sort of like, every time I had to, and it's not the interviewing part I don't like. That's my favorite part. I could do that all day, every day. It's the editing and the show notes and adding the music and adding the intro. And like, it's all of that. And then making the posts on Instagram and all of that I was just like, whoa, I don't want to do this. It's so annoying. So
I outsource all that.
Well, I just hired someone. Yeah. I just hired someone, not for the podcast, but they're going to take over my Instagram because that's another thing that I've had to have a very weird relationship with. But yeah, so I just took a break from it. And I took a break from it with no guilt whatsoever. It's just like, I'm feeling resentful of this. And when I start feeling resentful, that is my sign that I got to let something go.
Yeah.
And so I let it go. And then 3 weeks ago, I was like, I feel like putting a podcast episode out. And so I did it because I felt like it, not because I had to. I keep my clients low. I don't ever work with more than 10 people at once, one-on-one. I also structure my coaching a little bit differently from a lot of people in that I don't meet with clients every week. So I meet with clients every other week. And I do that for me just as much as for them because I don't want to overload them with too much stuff. I give a lot of homework, and my homework is stuff that requires time. So it's developing your awareness muscle and exercising your awareness muscle. That takes time. That takes a willingness to observe oneself, noticing patterns, noticing the voice in our head, noticing the stories that the voice in our head is telling us. All of that is homework that I give, but it's not something that everybody figures out in a week. Sometimes we do that for weeks, and that's the homework because that's the skill that we need to learn and the muscle we need to strengthen. And so I meet with clients every other week. And what this means is that I meet with all of my clients in a week. And then on my off week, I'm off. So I'm off 2 weeks of every month. And when I say off, I don't mean I'm like not working at all, but my client work is the most intense, energetic investment that I make.
Yeah.
And so I need to leave a lot of time between serving clients. Otherwise, I get burned out and I am of no use to them if I'm burned out or feeling resentful. And so that's one way that I structure my business that is different. Another way that I structure my business that's different is that I don't have like set office hours. Like I don't come in my office and like, okay, I'm working from 9 until 5 or whatever. If I have something I know I need to work on, I try to do it like first thing, which usually means about 10 a.m., 11 a.m. is whenever I start my workday. And then if I do it and I'm done and I don't really have anything else and nothing is like sparking joy or my business isn't giving me something to create or put out, then I just take the afternoon and I go swimming or I go lay on a blanket in my yard, or that's when I might batch create a bunch of reels. Like 2 days ago, I made 8 reels in one day, but now I have 8 reels that are already done and I just have to drip them out because I created it all in one afternoon. So I just really honor my energy. And when I'm not feeling it, I don't force myself to work. When I am feeling it, I do. It is work for me to go lay on a blanket in my yard because often in that stillness is when my business talks to me. If I go and sit down with my journal and I'm like, okay, tell me what to do. What am I going to do next? What's the next project? It's like crickets.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, let's go get baked and go lay in the grass, like all of a sudden it's like everything starts coming in and it just feels a lot. And I don't need to get baked, obviously. Like I'm semi-serious when I say that, but like that's not required. But it's just like letting go, right? Like letting go of control and of needing to have a plan and needing to control it and all of that. And just trusting that like when it's time for me to create something new, the inspiration and the energy will be there. And if I don't have the inspiration or the energy, then it's not time. And that doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. I lead from a very, very intuitive place. There is very little logic involved in what I do in my business. It is all from an intuitive place. Every offering, every workshop, every homework assignment I give a client, it's all coming from whatever is like my highest self is picking up in that moment. So I don't have a business plan. I don't have a marketing plan. I don't follow typical marketing advice. I'm not in a mastermind. I don't have not in any Facebook coaching groups to figure out what I'm supposed to do. Like I'm a little bit of a lone wolf in that way, but I have community as well. It's just in my business. I really need to keep it just my business and me. Like we're the ones running the show. And then my husband also works full time from home with me. So if I'm the like channeling the business, creator, coach, podcast person, I'm more of the face of our business and he's more of the back end stuff. So he does everything for my website, customer support. He runs all my email platforms. He custom codes everything on my website because I have a membership and I didn't want to do something like Patreon, or I did want to do something like Patreon, but I didn't want to use Patreon. I wanted to have it on my own thing. So he custom created that. He's constant. I have a membership that he's constantly custom programming and stuff. I'm a really high maintenance. I'm a really high maintenance person for a tech guy. But yeah, he does all of that. And we work in separate office spaces. It's really important for me to be in my own space. That's something that a lot of projectors require is like space to ourselves. So I have my own office space. I close the door, even when I'm not in here working, even if I'm just like laying on the floor, listening to some calming music and just meditating or something, I'm in here by myself. I have a shade over my window on my door, and my family knows that when the shade is down, don't bother mom. Like, cause she's either recording or she's with a client or she's on the floor. I also sleep by myself. So my husband and I do not sleep in the same room and we don't share.
So do I. Yeah.
Nice. Don't you love it?
It's so much better.
It's so much better.
Yeah. My boyfriend snores and has sleep apnea. And even though he has the mask, there's noise and there's movement. And like, for the sake of our relationship, like we will sleep in different rooms.
Yeah. It has made our relationship better. And people's number one question is like, well, doesn't it affect your sex life? Like, no.
0%.
We can
make it better
anytime we want.
It makes it better because I'm not like, oh, he woke me up all night. I hate you.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know. Did I really answer your question about my business?
Okay. Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's funny. We have a lot in common. I also set my business up that way. I max it at 10, but I don't do every other week. That's a really good idea. And then my boyfriend also, he does coding too. So he helps me with all like the podcast setup and he does all that for me too. So.
Yeah. Just last week, I hired for the very first time ever, hired a VA, and she's going to take over like my Instagram DMs and like creating some Instagram posts and stuff like that. Moderating comments, things like that. And I'm really, really excited to have that help.
Yes. I'm actually about to meet with one after this. So I'm in that.
Oh, nice.
I'm in that boat too. Just
congratulations.
Take over. Yes. Please. Take over all the hard part that is not enjoyable.
I just don't want to do things that I don't enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
I am a much better, like when I can take all of my energy and focus it on what I'm creating versus having to take creative energy and put it into answering DMs and comments. Like I am better for it. My business is better for it. I can serve my clients better. You know, a lot of people, especially if they're not coaches or practitioners in some way, and maybe not all coaches feel this way. I don't know. I just know for me, I can only serve from overflow.
Yeah.
So I never want to have to tap into my own energetic resources to serve either my clients, my groups, Instagram, whatever. So I need a lot of downtime, time by myself, time in nature, time on the floor, just like time off in order to build up the overflow. And so I schedule 2 weeks off every month from work, not because I'm lazy or because I'm going on extravagant vacations every month or whatever, but because it's work time for me too, but it's work time that instead of serving other people, I'm rebuilding my store of energy and overflow so that the next week I'm meeting with people, I have that to give. And during that downtime, that's when my best downloads come through. That's when I'm channeling wisdom from my business. That's when I get ideas for new projects or programs or whatever. It's during the downtime. It's never during the work time. So for me, the downtime is work time, and I deserve to be paid for that because that's eventually what is going to create my next offering. You know, so even though I'm not actively working, I'm still receiving and I'm recharging. And it's so necessary. And I will start getting so resentful and so bitter and so burned out if I'm not giving from overflow. So I'm always trying to create an overflow of energy so that I'm never tapping into my own energetic resources.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm really excited for people to listen. I think this is an awesome conversation. If you want to let everyone know where to find you, Instagram, website, all that.
Sure. So on Instagram, my handle is I am Lindsey Lockett, and Lindsey is with an EY, not an AY. My website is lindseylockett.com. I also am the host of the Holistic Trauma Healing podcast, and you can find that anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So Google, Anchor, Spotify, Apple. You can also listen to it from my website. I have a private online membership called the Trauma Healer Circle. So that's kind of like the community that I'm creating online and investing in online. I teach a workshop about every 6 weeks called Nervous System 101. If people are interested in that, it's a 2-hour workshop that's all about the autonomic nervous system, how it's impaired by trauma, the role of brain inflammation and all of that, awareness and consciousness. Like it's all packed into a 2-hour workshop. And that's probably one of my favorite things that I do. And if people want to just like go to my Instagram bio or something, you can get on a wait list for that workshop. That funnels into a group program called Nervous System Hygiene, which is also one of my favorite parts of my work. Super foundational. That the Nervous System 101 is like the why, and nervous system hygiene is the how. So I do that. And then I'm not currently taking new coaching clients, but I do either 6-month or 12-month containers for coaching with 90-minute coaching calls. And yeah, I think that's all I have.
Awesome. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, and it's enough for me.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Lindsey. I am so glad we had this conversation, and I will see you on the internet.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much for listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please do me a favor and like, subscribe, leave a comment, anything that can help get this information out to more people who may be struggling. You can also find me online at thehealerrevolution.com or amandapanacea.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at amandapanacea. Thank you so much for joining the revolution.